We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Hayamad Aleph in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 45a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara brought a brisa which had a machlokas tanoim whether a father can sell his daughter who is a minor as an amo ha'ivriya to someone who is a relative, because in general the master is able to have Kiddushin with the amo ha'ivriya. So the question is that a requirement in terms of the sale? And that was a machlokas tanoim between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Eliezer. The Tanna Kama said you're not allowed to sell the amo ha'ivriya to a relative, and Rabbi Eliezer said you can. And the brisa continues, V'shavin, both the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Eliezer agree, shemochra almona l'kohen gadol, that you can sell her. Let's say she's an almona, she's a widow. Generally speaking, a widow is not allowed to marry a kohen gadol, but you can sell her as a maidservant to a kohen gadol. Grusha v'chalutza l'kohen hedyon, and the father can sell her. Let's say she's a divorcee or she's a chalutza. He can sell her to a kohen hedyon. That everybody agrees, even the Tanna Kama agrees that is okay. And Rashi explains, V'shavin shemochra almona hoel v'yesh lo ba kiddushin. The reason is because there is kiddushin in this situation, meaning, let's say a kohen gadol gives kiddushin to an almona, that kiddushin does take effect. Afal b'shein ba'avera. Now, even though that's a kiddushin ba'avera, even though it's an avera to be mekadesh the almona, it's an avera for the kohen gadol to be mekadesh the almona, but still, nevertheless, that kiddushin does take effect. The kiddushin tofsim b'chayve lavin, because kiddushin are tofes, they do take effect even by chayve lavin, even if a negative commandment is violated, the Kiddushin still takes effect. And the Gemara continues, Hay almona hechidami. So when the Brisa says that he can sell her, let's say she's an almona, the father can sell the girl as a widow to a kohen gadol, what exactly is the case that she's an almona? Ileimu de kitsha avia. If the case is that her father had given her away to kiddushin, meaning she was married on a doraisa level, and then the husband died, and that's how she became an almona. So mimatzi mazvin, is that really true that the father is then able to sell her as an amo hivriya? He's not actually able to do that. Ha'ena de mocher espito l'shivchos achar ishus. There's a rule that a person cannot sell his daughter as a shivcha after he's already given her away in kiddushin, and so therefore that cannot be the case of the almona over here. Elalav, rather is it not, to Kodesh Ihi Nafsha, that she actually accepted the Kiddushin herself. It was without the authority of her father. V'kakari lo almana, and we're referring to her as an almana, meaning the Kiddushin must have taken effect at some level, and that contradicts what Ula said on the previous Amud, because Ula said on the previous Amud that if a young girl accepts a Kiddushin without the knowledge of her father, it's not a Kiddushin at all, it's considered nothing. She doesn't require a get, she does not require miyun, nothing is required in such a situation. And yet over here in this brisa, we're referring to this girl as an almana. Apparently something did take effect. And the Gemara answers, Amar of Amram, Amar of Yitzchak. Rav Amram says that Rav Yitzchak says, Hacha over here in this brisa, b'kiddusha yiyud. What we're talking about where she had a kiddushin through yiyud, meaning she was sold as an amo ha'ivriya before, and then that master had kiddushin with her. That's called kiddusha yiyud, and then that master died. So that's what rendered her an almana, and the father is allowed to sell her again as a shivcha. Why? V'alibud Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, because this follows the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar Mos Harishonos Lav LeKiddushin Nitnu. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says that original money that's given, meaning to say when the father sells the daughter originally as an amo ha'ivriya and he receives the money from the master, that money is not the money for kiddushin. So it's not as if the father gave her away to kiddushin, which if he did, then you would have a problem over here, because a person cannot sell his daughter as a shifcha after ishus, but that's not what happened. The ishus is considered by Yid to be independent. It's considered that the master is being mekadesh the amo ha'ivriya through the fact that he's not making her work any longer, and therefore it's like he's giving her that value as part of the kiddushin, and that kind of a kiddushin, the father wasn't involved in that kiddushin. It's not a problem of ein adam mocher espito l'shivcha zacharishas, and so therefore she has that kiddushin. That first master dies, and then she's having a second kiddushin. That's the case of an almona l'kohen gadol, where he is allowed to sell her as an almona to a kohen gadol. He's selling her as a maidservant, and that's not a problem, because again, even if there were to be yiyud in that situation, the kiddushin would take effect. It's a kiddushin ba'avera, but it's still going to be a kiddushin. And Rashi explains b'kiddusha yiyud, we're talking here about where she's an almana, and the original kiddushin, the first man, was actually a kiddusha yiyud. She was sold there as an amo hivriya, and then he was mekadesh her. Shenes almana mikiddusha yiyud. She became an almana from kiddusha yiyud. V'im tomer halo al yedei avia bo'ula. And if you're going to ask, this is what we explained before, if you're going to ask, but didn't that happen through her father? So it is a problem. He can sell her as a shifcha again, because he just caused ishus. He already had sold her as in kiddushin. V'havalei mocher leishus v'shovena mocher l'shifcha. shivchas. Why isn't that considered selling her for marriage? And then he's not allowed to sell her as a shivcha. And so the Gemara answered, Hamas Nisa Libed Rabbi Yossi. This, our Bryce over here follows Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar Mos, he says that original money that the father receives for selling her, lav lekiddushin nidnu, that's not the money of kiddushin. El leshivchas, that's just money for the purpose of shivchas. V'yiyud shetofes b'machmas shepoches prutos pu'ula sheyesh lo elen. The fact that the yiyud works, that's because he's not making her work anymore. There's a certain value. He's deducting those amount of prutos of work, and he's saying she doesn't have to work. So who ba v'lo al yedei aviyah? That's coming through that. It's not coming through her father. V'lo al yedei aviyah bola. It's not coming through her father. To lahave hach mechira basraisa, because if it were coming through her father, it would be a problem of shivchas basar ishas. It would be a problem that the father is selling her as a shivcha after ishas. That's not a problem over here. And again, this is not going to be a question on ula anymore, because we're talking about kiddusha yiyud. By kiddusha yiyud, everybody agrees over there that's a kiddushin by a minor. That's something that happens through the regular process of yiyud that's described by an amo hevriya. That has nothing to do with what ula was talking about. Ula was talking about a standard case of a minor, a girl who's a minor, who gives herself away to kiddushin without the knowledge of her father. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Itmar, it was stated, meis v'nafla lifnei achiv liyibum. Let's say you have a case where he dies. Rashi explains, itmar meis zeh shekitsha shelo l'das aviyah. We're going back on the case of the previous Amud. Let's say she accepted a kiddushin without the knowledge of her father, and then the person she accepted the kiddushin from, so he dies, and now she falls to his brother for yibum. So what's the halacha in that case? Amar Rav Huna Marav. Rav Huna says that Rav says mima enes lema amoro. She does do miyun in terms of his mimer. Ve'ena mima enes lezekaso, and she does not do miyun in terms of just the zeka band. Rashi explains, "Mima enes lema'amoro tzricha miyun im get hamutal aleh im asaba maimer," meaning to say she's going to require miyun, and she'll also require a get. She normally needs a get. Let's say you have a situation of yibum where the brother-in-law does a maimer, he does the kiddushin, the erusin stage of yibum, so you normally need a get in that situation. And here she's going to need miyun as well. Also, haget matzricha lios imo miyun. That get is going to require, together with it, there has to be miyun. But let's say there's just a zeka, meaning to say her husband just died and she fell to the brother to yibum, but they didn't actually do mimer. There's just the zeka, there's just that band of yibum. Avol im lo asaba mimer. But if the mimer was not done, deino lea get ela chalitza. So there the halacha is that if she wants to get out of the zeka, if she wants to get out of the band to the brother-in-law, she doesn't receive a get. She just needs to get chalitza lezekaso. Osa chalitza eina zoka kasa lios mema enes ima chalitza. She doesn't have to have a miyun together with the chalitza. She doesn't have to refuse the marriage together with the chalitza. Now the Gemara is going to explain exactly what we're saying over here. But again, Rav is saying that in such a situation, if she falls to his brother to yibum, this is again by a case where the girl who's a minor accepted kiddushin without the knowledge of her father, and now there's a situation of yibum. So if there was a mimer, so then she needs to have miyun as well as a get. But if it's just the zeka, if there's just the band of yibum, so then there's no requirement for miyun. And the Gemara explains, Keitzad, how so? Also, b'maimer, if the brother-in-law does a mimer with her, tzricha get, utzricha chalitza, utzricha miyun. She's actually going to require everything. She requires a get, she requires chalitza, and she requires miyun. And what's the reason for this? Tzricha get, the reason why she requires a get, shemo nisratza ha'av b'kiddushay sheni, because maybe the father actually agreed to that second kiddushin, that kiddushin she's having with the brother-in-law. If the father agreed to that kiddushin will be a kiddushin on a deoraisa level, and so therefore it's not going to simply be a derabanan maimer, it's going to be a real kiddushin, so she needs a get. Now tzricha chalitza. Now why does she require chalitza? That's shema nisratza ha'av b'kiddushay rishon. Maybe the father agreed to the first kiddushin that she did with the brother who died. Maybe that kiddushin the father agreed to. Maybe that was a marriage on a doraisa level. And if that's the case, so then there's going to be a requirement for chalitza. And tzricha miyan, and there's also a requirement that she does miyan, that she refuses the marriage. Why? Shema lo nisratza ha'av. Maybe the father did not agree. Lo b'kiddushay rishon v'lo b'kiddushay sheni. Maybe he didn't agree to the first kiddushin or the second kiddushin. And if he didn't agree to any of those kiddushins, so therefore v'yomru. But then people will say, ein kiddushin tovsin ba'chosav. Let's say he goes ahead and he marries her sister. They're going to say that the kiddushin is not going to be effective. We don't need to worry about a kiddushin with her sister, but we do need to worry about a kiddushin with her sister, because maybe the father did not agree to any of these kiddushins. Maybe she was never married to him, and if she was never married to him in any way, so then if he goes ahead and he's mekadesh her sister, that's going to be a good kiddushin. And we want to make sure that people are aware that that might be a good kiddushin. Kiddushin with the sister, and therefore we say that she should do miyun. That will indicate that this might not be a marriage on a doraisa level. People will then understand there might not be a doraisa marriage over here, and they'll realize that Kiddushin can take effect with her sister. And the Gemara continues, Lo asaba maimer. Now let's say the second brother doesn't do a maimer with her, so eina tzricha ela chalitza bilvad. So then the only thing that's going to be required is chalitza. What's the reason? Maya amrit, because what are you going to say? Tiboy nami miyun, because you're going to say she should have to do miyun as well. Shema yomru, because maybe people will say ein kiddushin tovsin ba'achosa. Maybe people will say if we don't do miyun, people will say that the kiddushin is not going to take effect with the sister, because they'll understand, they'll think that there was a full marriage over here, but that's not really an issue. Because everybody knows if we're going to do chalitza in this case, which is what we're doing, everybody knows that the sister of a chalitza is only asur midrabanan. Meaning to say, if she goes ahead and there's a bond over here of yibam and she breaks that bond by doing chalitza in this case, so now she's a chalutza of this particular brother, and if this particular brother goes ahead and is mekadesh her sister, so everybody knows the kiddushin is going to take effect because she's only a chalutza, and a chalutza, that din by chalutza is only midrabanan. And so therefore, since the din by chalutza is only midrabanan, in terms of the sister of a chalutza, that's only asur midrabanan, everyone knows kiddushin will take effect. There's no reason to require miyun so that people understand that. They already understand that. The Yomer Reish Lakish, because Reish Lakish said, Kan Shana Rebbe, that here Rebbe taught, Achos Grusha Midoraisa. Let's say the sister of a person's Grusha, the sister of a person's divorcee, that's Asr Midoraisa. There the Kiddushin doesn't take effect. If a person is Mekadesh, a woman, and he divorces her, so then we say he's not allowed to marry the sister of that Grusha as long as that Grusha is alive. However, Achos Chalutza, but let's say it's the sister of his Chalutza. Let's say he had a situation where there was a bond of Yibam between them, and they didn't do anything, they just did a chalitza to undo that bond, so that the fact that he's usher to her sister is only midivrei sofrim, that's only midrabanan, and everybody understands that kiddushin will take effect, and therefore there is no reason to require miyun. And Rashi explains, Hakol Yodim, everyone knows, Shafilim Chalitza Zu Chalitza Gemur, even if this Chalitza is a full Chalitza, Kiddushin Tovsin Ba'achosa, but everyone still knows that the Kiddushin will take effect if he has Kiddushin with her sister. Sha'achos Chalutza in Asur, Ela Midivrei Sofrim, because the sister of a Chalutza is only prohibited Midivrei Sofrim. So even if we're going to say that this Kiddushin, the father agreed to the Kiddushin, and it is a full Chalitza, it's a Chalitza Gemura, but there's no reason to require Miyun, because everybody knows, even if it is a Chalitza Gemura, everybody knows that the Kiddushin is going to take effect with her sister. You don't need miyun to indicate that. Kan Shana Rebbe, here Rebbe taught, meaning biyavamos shaninu, this is in Yavamos, it says hacholetz liyavemto. Let's say a person does chalitza with his sister-in-law, v'nasa achiv es achosa, then his brother marries her sister, v'meis, and then that brother dies, so the halach is choletzes v'lo mesyavemes. The halach is that you don't do yibam over there, you just do chalitza. But on the other hand, hamegarish ishto, let's say a person divorces his wife, v'nasa achiv es achosa, then his brother marries her sister, v'meis, and then his brother dies, harezu petura, so in that case she's completely putter, there's not even a requirement for chalitza. Why? The havala achos grushaso, because that woman, that widow, is actually the sister of his divorcee, she ervalo b'chayeh, that's considered arayis during her lifetime. And so therefore we see a distinction between achos gerushaso and achos chalutzaso. The al Mishnah zu amar Reish Lakish, it's on this Mishnah that Reish Lakish says, kan shana lana Rebbe mi Mishnah zu anu lemedim. Reish Lakish says that Rebbe is teaching us from this Mishnah that achos gerusha have every min Torah, that the sister of a person's divorcee, that's considered doraisa arayis. Aval achos chalutza ein ela midivrei sofrim, but the sister of a person's chalutza, that's only considered prohibited on a derabanan level. And the Gemara continues, Hanu beitrei, there were two individuals, dahava kashasu charma tusei tzife bebavel, they were drinking wine underneath the poplar trees in Bavel. Those are a kind of willow tree. Shakal chad minayo kasa de chamer. Now one of them took a cup of wine. Yoav le'lechaver, and he gave the cup of wine to his friend. Amar, and he said, Mikta shali barateich liveri. He said, your daughter should be mikudeshes to my son. In other words, I am giving you this cup of wine. This cup of wine should be a kiddushin. It's coming from my son to you, so to speak, and it should be a kiddushin. Your daughter should be mikudeshes to my son. And the Gemara says, Amar Ravina, this question was brought to Ravina, and Ravina said, Afilu l'man damar chayshinan shem nisrat ha'av. Even according to the one who says, let's say you have a situation of a girl that's a minor that receives kiddushin, so we say we have a concern that maybe the father would agree to that kiddushin, and therefore maybe it's a kiddushin. Even according to that man damar, but in this particular case, And Rashi explains, Tusei tzifi tachas iloni tziftzifa shumin arav. Again, they were sitting under these trees that are from the willow family. Lashon acher machzolos nasunas lagabi zizin habolten b'rishos rabim l'sheves tachtein mimnei hacham. Another understanding of tzife is it's a kind of canopy that sticks out over rishos rabim. People sit under it in order to get shade. Brateich Livri said, your daughter to my son, bitcha livni. Again, your daughter to my son. And Ravina said, afilu l'mandomar debashin eskacha shalol dasavia. Even according to the one who says that, let's say, have a kiddushin from a daughter, she receives a kiddushin not with the knowledge of her father, but shemen isratzo avamina. But we say maybe the father would agree, and maybe it is a kiddushin. We have such a concern, but still over here, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Memhei Amud Beis.